Hey folks, welcome back to my Kitten Reads and welcome to my July wrap up. So I read 13 things in July. This was very much helped by doing Booktubeathon, but you know, still 13 things and 7 is only kind of half of that. So I'm really pleased with how my July went, and I'll get right into the little mini reviews. So the first stuff that I read in July was digital. I read Monstress Volume 1 by Marjorie, which is a graphic novel which was nominated for the Hugo Awards. This one is a fantasy-based one and it's full of female characters and even disabled characters, and it's kind of about a girl who's trying to get away from being a slave, but also trying to find out what happened to her mother and what is happening about her. And there's like this other monster thing that is kind of living with it inside her. It's the story, I found the story a little bit confusing, but the artwork was really quite beautiful. So I really enjoyed the artwork, if not so much the story. I don't know if I'll keep going with it. It's a bit graphic in terms of like killing people and wounds and all that kind of like gore and stuff, but the art is quite beautiful. So that was Monstress Volume 1 by Marjorie. Then I finished up Rosemary and Rue by Seanan McGuire. This is the first of the October Days series, which is her first and her longest running yet urban fantasy novel series. And so this is the story of Toby Day, and in this first book we're introduced to Toby, and we're introduced to the fact that she's a private detective, but she's also part Fae, and so a lot of her work is in the Fae world, and she's on a case right at the start of the book when she gets turned into a fish and left in a pond in the park in San Francisco. And then you flash to, I think it's like 15 years later or 20 years later, something like that, and she's suddenly not a fish anymore, the spell's broken, but life's moved on without her. And so she's trying to deal with the fact that she went missing, her husband doesn't want to even deal with her, neither does her daughter. They don't really want to know anything about her. So she's on her own trying to figure out how to make a living and how to live in this new world where she's completely out of place because she's been missing for so long. And then shit starts to happen and she starts getting drawn back into the world of the Fae, even though she really doesn't want to be. And that is Toby Day, and I really enjoyed it. It's a little bit darker than the Encrypted series, but I still really enjoyed it. So I will definitely continue on with that series at some stage and I'm trying to teach myself how to pronounce the various types of Fae. I'm not going to try it right now, but one thing I do like about the book is that it comes, like, one of the glossaries is a pronunciation guide to the various types of Fae, which, you know, they're not really, most of it's kind of Gaelic and therefore you can't really sound it out. But yeah, I really enjoyed that book. Yes. So, and then I read The Vision Volume 1 by Tom Kelly, which is another one of the nominated graphic novels for the Hugo Awards, and I didn't like it. Like, I went into it really excited because, well, from what I'd heard about it, it was sort of just trying to figure out the Vision and his new family of androids, trying to figure out what it was to be human and living in the suburbs. But yeah, I just didn't get it. I ended up skimming a lot of it because I was just like, no, I don't get it. So it just really wasn't, didn't like it. Sorry. But so that was The Vision Volume 1 by Tom King. And then I finished off my pretty much my Hugo reading actually. I didn't end up reading much more after that except for Paper Girls Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan, which is the final of the graphic novels I was reading. It was okay, it was a decent story. The artwork wasn't really quite my style. It was a story of 4 girls who were on their paper round and suddenly weird stuff started happening, like time travel and aliens, and like I said, I didn't quite get it. It wasn't quite me, but it was decent. Like, it wasn't bad. So that was Paper Girls Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan. Then, having gone through all of that on digital, I read Anne's House of Dreams by Ellen Montgomery. This is continuing my Anne of Green Gables reading. This is the 5th Anne of Green Gables book. And so this starts with her marriage to Gilbert, and she's just married Gilbert, and they head off to the house that Gilbert's found for them in their new town of Four Winds, where Gilbert is going to be the new doctor. And so it's this perfect house with everything that Anne wants. There's trees, there's a brook in the garden, there's flowers, and there are all sorts of interesting people for Anne to meet as she settles into life as a married woman, and goes through some of the ups and downs of that. So she meets Captain Jim, who's the lighthouse keeper and who's been in Four Winds for years, since he was a boy, and Miss Cornelia, who lives down the house, who hates all men but is quite opinionated and eccentric, but the kindest of souls. And she meets Leslie, the beautiful, beautiful girl that lives just up the road, but is sort of not very easy to get to know and has a tragic past. So Anne's House of Dreams, I really enjoy this one by Ellen Montgomery. Then we hit the books that I read for the booktubeathon. So I read 7 books in 7 days, which is, a lot of books. But before I forget, I also reread Vanities and Vexations by Sarah J. Waldock. This is one of my favourite of the Jane Austen sort of sequels. It's not particularly well written. There's a lot of errors in it, but in terms of grammar and But it's a sequel to Jane Austen that I somehow really enjoy, which has Elizabeth and Darcy launching not only Georgiana, but Kitty and Mary onto London for the season, as well as they had to invite Anne de Burgh to come and stay and live through the season vicariously. And, romantic shenanigans ensue for all of them. So, so that's really sweet too. Anyway, speaking of Jane Austen, the first thing I read for Booktubeathon was Lady Susan, which is one of Jane Austen's very early writings, and it is very short, and it is basically a whole bunch of letters between various characters telling this really fluffy, ridiculous story about this woman, Lady Susan, who's a widow and who keeps playing with men. She's got one man that she's basically having an affair with, and another man that she's trying to attract for her daughter, but her daughter doesn't want anything to do with it. And so then when she has to leave her lover's house due to shenanigans, she goes to her brother and her sister-in-law, who, her sister-in-law is like, oh, I've heard all this stuff about her, and her sister-in-law's brother is like, so have I, it's terrible. Then the brother comes to stay and suddenly starts falling in love with Lady Susan, and just shenanigans via letters, opinions of various things. It's so very funny and just ridiculous and fluffy, and I really enjoyed it, as I do with all Jane Austen. So I read that. And then I read this. I read The Women in Black by Madeleine St. John. St. John was how she pronounced it, although most people pronounce it St. John. So Madeleine St. John was an Australian author. She passed away in the early 2000s, and this was published in about, I think, 1993, 1994, something like that. I had borrowed it from the library, but I only had a 2-week loan on it because it has a lot of holds on it. I had a lot of hold. I'd had it on hold. And so I decided to read it, and I read it, and I took it back to the library, and then I bought my own copy, and I bought the audiobook. Because I have completely fallen in love with this book. Now, the reason that I had it on hold was because earlier this year, I saw the musical The Ladies in Black, which is with the music and lyrics written by Tim Finn of New Zealand fame. He was in Crowded House, he was in what was the other? It's gone off the top of my head, but the other band that Tim and Neil Finn were in before Crowded House. I don't know why, I can't remember it. Anyway, and so I saw that musical, and it was one of the most joyous experiences I've had in theatre in a long time. I absolutely loved it, so I thought I'd try the book that musical was based on, which is The Women in Black. Oh my God. I've had a similar experience. The only time I've had such a similar experience with reading a book for the first time was when I first discovered Pride and Prejudice at age 11. I read this in a night, and then this week, which is technically August, I listened to the audiobook twice. So in 2 weeks, I have read it 3 times. I love it. It's amazing. So, to read the synopsis on the back, at the very end of the ladies' frocks department, past cocktail frocks, there was something very special, something quite wonderful, but it wasn't for everybody. That was the point, because there, at the very end, there was a lovely arch, on which was written in curly letters, model gowns. In the famous F.G. Goods department store, Lisa is the new sales assistant temporary in ladies' cocktail frocks. She is about to meet Magda, the glamorous continental refugee and guardian of the rose-pink cave of model gowns. So basically, this is the story of a whole bunch of women, including young Lisa, who work as sales assistants with cocktail frocks and model gowns in this department store in Sydney in 1960. And they just, it's like there's not a huge narrative. I mean, probably the most narrative arc is probably Lisa and her story, because it's set during the 6-7 weeks where she's the temporary sales assistant over Christmas and the New Year's sales. But all of the different women have different stories of their own, and it is so funny and warm and just gorgeous. It's ordinary women living ordinary lives, all interacting just because they work together in the 1960s. And it's just, I may actually end up doing an individual review of this because I love it. I really, really love it, and I'm going to be throwing this book at people's heads for a while. But yes, that's Madeleine St. John's, The Women in Black. Anyway, to continue on for that week, I read volume 2 of Sailor Moon, which was, you know, nostalgic and sweet and pretty, and confused me slightly because I was pretty sure I knew who Princess Serenity was, and when they were like, Sailor V is Princess Serenity, I'm like, wait, what? But that got sorted out. So, yeah, so this is the continuing adventures of Sailor Moon, you know, being in love and you defending truth and justice. So, yeah, really sweet, really cute, really quick read. And then I read The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. LeGuin. This is a Hugo Award-winning book, and it is part of Ursula K. LeGuin's Hainish cycle. This is the second one of her books that I've read, and this is basically the story of colonialism. So it's set on a planet that's been colonized by Terrans from Earth, but it has its own indigenous variation of humanity because the various worlds in the Hainish cycle have been seeded by humanity but then left to evolve on their own. And basically the colonists are using the natives, the indigenous people, as labour, and some of them are treating them well, but some of them are treating them terribly, and they're raping them, and they're using them as slaves, and they're beating them and all that kind of stuff. And this indigenous population who live in the trees and you know, in the forests, and have a kind of a sort of lucid dreaming power thing. They've never had murder, like they don't kill each other, but one of them has a dream and becomes a kind of a god and brings the ability to kill to them, and there's a rebellion. And so it's about it's about colonialism, it's about rebelling against colonialism, and what happens when you introduce a concept such as murder to a society that didn't have it before, and that may change that society forever. I found it very affecting, and I found it very difficult to read because in Australia we have a very difficult relationship with colonialism, and myself personally, I have ancestors on both sides of that colonialism, and I have both like original settlers and convicts, and I have a connection to the Indigenous people as well, even though it's a long way back. And so I found it very uncomfortable and very blunt and brutal, but a very good book. So that's The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. Le Guin. The next two books I'm going to talk about together because they are Gemma Alone and Goodbye Gemma by Noel Streatfeild. This was one of my favourite series as a kid, I didn't read all of Noel Streatfeild. In fact, I've only read one other Noel Streatfeild book, apart from the Gemma series. So this is book 3 and book 4. They're out of print at the moment, which is why I have different copies, because I've had to like hunt down secondhand copies in various places. But yes, so Gemma, the Gemma series is about Gemma Bow, who she's a child actress and her mother is an actress, but Gemma's roles have just dried up and her mother has been offered, they're British, and her mother has been offered a TV show in America. So her mother sends Gemma to stay with her cousins, the Robinsons, and her aunt and uncle in the small town. And so she has to learn how to be an ordinary person and it's about growing up, because she's sort of 11, 12 when she starts, and she's about 14 when it finishes the series. And she still wants to be an actress, but she learns a lot of life lessons in learning how to be, how to handle her cousins, who are all talented but very sort of down-to-earth ordinary people, and how to learn to go to school and, distinguish herself in the right way instead of the wrong way and all that kind of thing. So in Gemma alone, she's been sent to drama school for the first time, which suits her, and then her mother finds this role for her and forces her to do it, and so it's it's her figuring out whether she should try for more roles or go back to drama school. And then in Goodbye Gemma, she's back at drama school, and she gets offered the chance to play Juliet in the university production, because the university doesn't have any appropriate Juliets for their very talented young actor John Cam, and all her cousins start to get all these opportunities and stuff as well. And then her mother comes back and sends for Gemma to live in London with her again at the end. So it's very sweet, and I really, really love the series, and so I'm glad I've finished rereading it. So that's Gemma Alone and Goodbye Gemma by Noel Streatfeild. And then I finished off the month of July with this, Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. This is the second book in the Every Heart a Doorway series, which has a name, I believe, I just can't remember. The Wayward Children series, that's right. And but this is actually a prequel. It's the backstory for the characters of Jack and Jill, who are in Every Heart a Doorway. And so this is a story about bad parenting. It's a story about being shoved into certain gender roles that you're not necessarily suited for. So you have Jack and Jill. They're born to two parents who want children as a status symbol, not as actual children. And they end up with twin girls. So one is pushed into being, Jacqueline is pushed into being a pretty princess who can't get dirty and wears frilly clothes and all that kind of thing for her mother. And Gillian is pushed into being a tomboy for her father. And then they end up going down these stairs in this trunk that they discover, and find the world of the Moors, which is not a very nice world. It's a world of vampires and werewolves and mad scientists. And because of the way they've been pushed into gender roles by their parents, they don't actually trust each other as like sisters perhaps should. And so they make different choices and try the roles that they haven't been able to try before. And so Gillian becomes the perfect vampire princess, the daughter of the vampire who lives in the castle. And Jacqueline decides that she wants to go off with the mad scientist, despite the fact that she's pretty much got OCD and a fear of dirt. And so they grow in different directions, and those directions are not necessarily a good thing. And things start to happen when they hit sort of the age of 17. But yeah, so this is really good. I think I probably connected with Every Heart a Doorway a little more, but I still would have rated this. If Goodreads allowed half stars, I'd give it a 4.5 out of 5. So not quite the 5 stars that Every Heart a Doorway was, but very, very close. So yeah, that's Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. And that is the 13 things I read in July, by which I have now reacted and not actually read anything that will count so far for the first week of August. Like I said, I've listened to the audiobook of The Women in Black twice, but I can only count that once for the year. So yeah, that doesn't count. But anyway, that's 13 things read in July, and I will see you again soon. Bye.